guys, it's Libby and welcome to my very exciting Best Books of 2019 video. Guys, I was a little bit afraid that this video would not be able to happen. It was not until October of this year that I got to my first new to me, non-reread 5-star book. And so I was like, am I gonna not do a video? Am I gonna have to do a video where I talk about 4-star books? And I was like, this book was pretty good, I guess. Am I gonna do a video where I just highlight some really great rereads that I had? Because I did have great rereads. Richard II, Series of Unfortunate Events, all of the other Shakespeare's. This is crooked, let's fix it. That's nicer. So yeah, but fortunately in October, I finally got to some 5 stars in the last little bit of the year. So we're gonna talk about those. I have 4 books to share with you out of the 100 that I read, exactly 100 that I read in 2019. And so I'm gonna go in the same order that I used last year, which is descending Goodreads rating. So I'm gonna start with the one with the highest Goodreads rating, where I most agree with the general readership, and we're gonna end with the one with the lowest Goodreads rating, where I most disagree with the general readership. It's a book that other people just don't appreciate. So the first one with the very impressive Goodreads rating of 4.18 is Sex with Shakespeare. Here's Much Ado with Pain, but More with Love by Gillian Keenan. I was really hoping this would make the list, and it did. I just talked about this one a whole bunch in my December wrap-up. I did feel a little bit weird having to have a favorite book be in my December wrap-up in like just the previous video. So I don't want to gush about it too much here, but you know, it's the nonconformist sexuality plus Shakespeare analysis book of my dreams. Gillian Keenan is an amazing writer who will make you think new and interesting thoughts about the works of William Shakespeare, and also make you feel less weird about your own sexuality, whatever your own sexuality is. It's very like affirming and sex positive, and also like good at helping you deal? Yes. In this book, you get to see her relationships with people, with one person who is also really into spanking, with someone who thinks that spanking is like disgusting, and with someone who thinks that spanking is like fine and there's nothing wrong with it, but just can't really get into it themselves. And so I think this book is really interesting if you have a nonconformist sexuality, or if your partner has a nonconformist sexuality, or if your friend does and you want to be supportive, or if you are just looking for a new perspective on Shakespeare, or what I was not expecting, if you want some travel writing, because she's lived in a bunch of really interesting places. The second book on this list is close behind the first in terms of Goodreads ratings. It has a 4.14. It is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Guys, you've heard about it from many other people besides me, but this book is not a drill. It is the real stuff. It is super good. This book is basically Pride, Prejudice, and the Evils of Capitalism. I don't read many Victorian novels that are this interested in exploring the difficulties of class dynamics more in their roots than in their expressions. So like Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy are very interested in, you know, given the fact that there are people of a broad array of socioeconomic statuses, how do they act? How do they interact? How could we maybe make this better for everyone? This book is much more interested in like why that happens, which was really interesting. If you're watching my channel, then I assume you've already read this one, but if you haven't, guys, don't sleep on it. Third book on this list just clears the 4-star barrier with 4.01 stars, and it's actually one that I did not give 5 stars to when I first read it. I'm really not sure if I would give it 5 stars now. This is one that I read earlier in the year. I'll just tell you what it is. It's Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. So I think I read this all the way back in January, and I gave it a 4.5. I think part of that is that I was so depressed by it. This is an adaptation of the Koshchei the Deathless stories from Russian folklore. There are a couple of different stories about Koshchei, and they sort of get blended in this one. And it's not set in like ancient old-timey Russia, it's set in 20th century Russia / the Soviet Union and all of the hot mess that was. And as one would imagine from a book with that setting, it is so bleak. Like, you get to watch a lot of people starving to death during the siege of Leningrad. Hooray. And so this book did not, as Marie Kondo would say, spark joy. It sparked sadness and depression and loneliness. And so I may have just given it the 4.5 because I was sad when I got to the end of it. I didn't really want to like reread it. But like technically it's still really, really good. This is, I think, my second Volente. I think the only other Volente I've read is the Deco Punk documentaries in space one, Radiance. I definitely preferred this to Radiance. It does have that classic Cat Volente, like, slightly off writing style. It's like all of the characters are very aware that they are in a work of fiction, and they don't really care to get you up to date with the fact that this is a work of fiction. They sort of expect you to understand that, yes, this is a work of fiction, so we're going to be weird in it. But I think that her approach did work very well for this period in history where, like, the sort of expected rhetoric of the Soviet Union was blatant lies and everyone knows that you're lying, but it's okay, you just say it. The speech act is what is important, the speech is not what is important. So yeah, this book, very interesting. I do want to give it a reread. There's like maybe gonna be a sequel. This book came out in like 2011, I think. And Goodreads lists that there is going to be a sequel called Matryoshka, which is an adaptation of the Firebird folktale. Cat Valenti did say she was going to do this on her blog like shortly after this one came out, but I haven't seen anything else about it since, so I think it is also set more during the Siege of Leningrad. So our main character leaves the Siege of Leningrad for a little bit, and I think the Firebird, or Matryoshka, is going to be about a character who stays during the Siege of Leningrad. So, you know, super upbeat. And the last one I do not have a physical copy of, but it is the first book that I gave 5 stars to that was not a reread in 2019, even though Goodreads only gives it 3.64. I'm ashamed of you, Goodreads. And that is The Semi-Attached Couple by Emily Eden. I'm not totally sure whether to call this a Georgian novel or a Victorian novel. It was written in 1829, but not published until 1860. And I don't know if Emily Eden did any revisions to it before its publication to sort of update it into the Victorian time. The setting is sort of generally 19th century. There aren't any like stylistic or political events that get cited that would help you place it within that time period. This book is so very fun. For the most part, it does not feel the need to be weighed down with things like plot. And it just fills itself with delightfulness, delightful characters in delightful scenarios. A lot of it takes place at sort of one big gathering at a country house, and it really feels like you've been invited to a country house, and you get to see all these people interacting as you peep in at keyholes. Interestingly, you also get to hear from the servants. So if you've seen the movie Gosford Park, it's kind of like this is book form of Gosford Park, but with no murders. So the sort of centrum, the nexus around which this book is built is a couple who has recently gotten married. I think they actually get married at the very beginning of the book. And it's maybe not working out. So we hear a little bit about like their marriage, but we also hear about like all of their friends and siblings and neighbors and also other people who hang out with them that they don't really like, and how they are all gossiping about each other, falling in love, falling out of love, falling in love but not being able to marry because they don't have enough money. It was super fun. I highly recommend this book. It is not very well known, but undeservedly so. Absolutely recommend Semi-Attached Couple. And that's it for 2019. Goodbye, year. Goodbye, decade. Welcome to the new 20s.